Welcome to the IDP Plus Advice Show. Today we're going to be talking about top 24 repeaters and top 24 non-repeaters for tight ends in 2025. And with that, let's go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone. I am your host, Ricky Rodriguez. You can find me on X at RickyRod66. I am joined by Sean Teague, the guru, at Sean8386 on X. We're thrilled to be here with you again today, and we're wrapping up the ninth of our series of 9 shows related to repeaters and non-repeaters in the top 24. We've done the 5 true IDP positions. We've done quarterback, running back, wide receiver from a skill set position, and we're going to wrap it up with tight ends today. If you've missed any of those shows, you can go to this IDP Plus channel on YouTube. You can go to Spotify, and you can go back and listen to any of those shows. Of course, the premise across all these shows, if this happens to be the first one you're watching, is statistics have shown that the repeat rates for the top 12 and top 24 at every position, IDP and offense, is not as high as you would think. And so that's what Sean and I have been leading you through these 8 shows and now going into this 9th show. Sean, I hope you're doing well today.
I am. I'm doing good enough.
All right. Well, good enough. Well, that works.
Good enough.
All right. With that, so going to what the premise we build the show around, as I was talking about earlier, we're on tight ends now. And for those that are able to see on YouTube, you can see we have the box around tight ends. And tight ends actually has one of the highest repeat rates of all the positions, in that 6 of the top 12 on average repeat year over year. And of the top 24, 15 of the 24 repeat year over year, which is the second highest of all positions next to quarterback. Now, as a reminder, these statistics are based on a 10-year study. So some years at 15 might be 17, some years might be 13, but it averages out to 15 over this 10-year period. So what Sean and I attempt to do in these shows is let you know who we think is going to fall out of the top 24, the top 24 non-repeaters, and then we let you know who we think is going to move into the top 24 along with the repeaters. So that's the premise of the show, and that's what we've been doing for these 8 now for the 9th show of this series. And there's some interesting takes that, as the season finishes in the January, February timeframe next year, Sean, to go back and look at how we did with our crystal balls. And some of our crystal balls I feel pretty good about. Maybe a couple of them, the crystal ball is a little bit cloudy, but overall pretty good. What do you think, man?
Yeah, I'm actually nervous about some of these already. On a couple of these, just with some moves that have happened and just some news coming out in camps, which a lot of it's smoke and mirrors anyway. But yeah, it's going to be really interesting to come back and just see how close we were.
All right. Well, with that, the scoring system that we follow the Kings Classic scoring system, which is done as part of the Fantasy Football Expo in Canton at in the Hall of Fame. It's actually done in the basement of the Hall of Fame where the draft is. And as a side note, a quick plug for it, the Fantasy Football Expo, August 8th through 10th in Canton. Come on out there, meet a lot of great people in the industry. Whether it be some of the bigger names, maybe people you've never met before, some of the smaller sites, but some tremendous people, and a great fun time with all kind of events, activities, drafts, you name it. So come on out to the Fantasy Football Expo, August 8th through 10th, and you can even maybe come and watch the Kings Classic happening in the basement of the Hall of Fame. I'll be participating in the IDP version, which is the quote Butkus division. Okay, that tangent aside, now with the scoring system for the Kings Classic, for offense in particular, it is your typical PPR scoring system, and so that's what we used. And now, Sean, when you went and looked at some of the past Kings Classic results from the past couple of years compared to what we were just showing, and I'll pull that back up to share with everyone, the 6 of the top 12 repeating in the 15 top 24, for the last couple of years, obviously not as statistically significant as over 10 years, but what did the last couple of years show?
Yeah, last year we showed 16 repeaters in the top 24 and 5 repeaters in the top 12, which is pretty much on the money. And
Pretty spot
then,
on.
yeah, and then the year before it was completely accurate. 15 repeaters in the top 24 and 6 in the top 12. So dead on.
Oh wow. Okay. So that's the story, folks. So you can see right there, whether it be the last couple of years in this Two Kings Classic, whether it's 10-year average, whether it be tight ends, other positions, we have this high repeat rate. So Sean, let's start off by showing everybody the top 24 from last year's King Classic scoring system. And so I've got that on the screen. Of course, Brock Bowers was number 1 on the list, and Jawan Johnson of the Saints snuck in at number 24. So when you first started this exercise and when you got into it, what was your kind of takeaways as you were going through the exercise? What you felt was easy, what you felt was hard, or maybe it was all hard or all easy? What did you think when you were trying to kind of take out 9 names?
Taking none out, I'm not going to say it was easy. There were several that I had no problem taking off the list. But compared to the other positions, this one was probably the least interesting. We only
Don't
had
tell that
30.
to our audience;
Yeah.
they're going to hang up, man.
There's only 32 teams, and it's not wide receivers where there could be 2 or 3 options from each team. We're pushing one on some of these. So similar to defensive tackle, I'd say, where it's very top heavy and then it's a lot of filler. But it was just as hard trying to figure out which names to put back on the list, even though there was only a select few to choose from. It still didn't feel good putting all them on the list. So it had some unique challenges compared to the other uh, positions for sure.
Yeah, for me, 7 of the 9 were easy to take off the list, and then the last 2 where I debated on a few, and I went through some
Mhm.
narratives in my head about what might happen, and went back and forth with those narratives of which ones I thought more likely. And as showed to the audience here in a second, we ended up agreeing on 7 of the 9, and we both were off with a couple, which made or differed on a couple, which makes sense based on what I just described. So let's go ahead and show everybody and talk to everyone with who we agreed that we were going to take off the list. So the ones that we did take off the list that we both agreed on were Zach Ertz, who was number 7 last year, Pat Fryermuth, Cole Kmet, Conklin, Schultz, Taysom Hill, who had a tight end designation last year, and Jawan Johnson. So those were the ones we both took off the list. But now, Sean, as we get into this here, um, you and I differed, as I mentioned, on a couple of these, and so let's go ahead and start off with where one of the ones we differed on, where you took off Cade Otton off the list. I left him on, but tell everybody why you took Cade off the list.
Yeah. So with the change in offensive coordinator, I think we're going to have some kind of effects here, and I really don't know what those effects are going to be. So I'm a little more cautious with him, dropping him down and looking into his stats last. He really excelled when both Mike Evans and Chris Godwin were gone. So he became a focal point in the middle there. This year we're going to have Mike Evans back healthy. Chris Godwin's coming back sometime. Well, they've drafted. They've got depth at wide receiver. I mean, there's a lot of mouths to feed. You throw in Rashad White, Bucky Irving. There's a lot going on,
They
and I
drafted Aguka. McMillan came on late in the year.
exactly. So you start throwing all these mouths in there to feed, and I feel like Kate Otton's kind of getting pushed out. He's probably going to be that odd man out. And over the years, he's been in the top 24. I think all 2 3 years here now, but he stays on that lower side of it. So just coming off the list, not by a lot. I still see some value in him, especially with Godwin probably starting out season on pup or whatever there. But for the whole season, I see him definitely coming down this list.
Yeah, so when I was creating my narrative, and Otten was one of the ones I was debating, and to your point, he had his biggest weeks when they had a lot of injuries at
Mm.
wide receiver, and when those wide receivers came back, he came back down to earth, for lack of a better term. But my gut is telling me he'll do just enough to hang into the top 24. And to your point earlier, so I don't expect him to finish in the top 12. I think those special weeks when
Right.
some of the wide receiver injuries happen, that's what put him in the top 12. Otherwise, he barely cracks the top 24. I think he still barely cracks the top 24. But definitely understand your point on that one for sure.
Yeah. And then let's jump over to one of yours. One of the few teams with two viable tight end options. You decided to take Mr. Mark Andrews off.
Correct. So Andrews and Likely were on the list, and typically it's rare that a team will have two tight ends in the top 24. So right off the bat, I said, I got to pull one of these off. Okay, then the question is which one? When there's discussion about trying to make Likely a Pro Bowler by the head coach, that's a star in Likely's favor, or a check mark, or whatever you want to call it. On the other hand, there's also discussion about potentially trading Mark Andrews, but then they somehow worked through that, and at least as of now, they traded him. But who knows what might happen at the trade deadline? Not to mention he's crossed into his 30s now. Tight ends have tended to have a little bit more longevity than other positions as they got into their early 30s. But he did have some injury problems last year, including coming out of that car accident and all. And I'm like, okay, he played better as the year went on. How much of it was that accident, which they really maybe downplayed overly, and it had a bigger impact than we realized earlier in the year. And then he was healthier as the year went on. So that was one of the things that I also debated as well. But at the end, because of the age and a lot of these shows, I've been for an old guy like me, picking on age of these players, I've been doing that. And so I went with what I heard about Likely's comment from the head coach, thought about the age and the fact that they were going to trade him. And so I pulled Andrews off the list as a result.
Yeah, and to for Andrews last year, his receptions and yardage weren't as high as we would like. It was really touchdown dependent. I think he had a career high 11 touchdowns last year. So that's something else that's going to be a little hard to replicate. So I can see why you took him off. I considered taking Likely off at one point. I read the same things you did, where the coach is really pumping him up, and just with the wide receivers, Bateman just got a big deal. Flowers is coming back. Hopkins is coming in. Is there going to be enough volume there to support two tight ends? And when you start digging in some of these numbers, if they both have just decent seasons, they both could make the top 24 again. So uh, I don't hate your reasons for pulling off Andrews. I still think we could see him traded and find his own spot on whatever team and stay on this list. But I feel like the Dolphins really missed us there earlier. A
Yep.
little bitter about that.
Well, you mentioned the Dolphins, and so let's move on here now. So Pat Fryermuth,
Mm.
of course, finished number 11 last year as we look at this list. Junno Smith finished number 4, and now they're both in Pittsburgh together. So I'm glad we did tight ends a little bit later because that came after the trade.
Yeah, that might
And
look a little silly
we
on us.
both we both left Jonnu on the list, and we both pulled Fryermuth off the list. So Sean, why don't you talk a little bit about your thoughts about pulling Fryermuth off the list and leaving Jonnu on?
So Arthur Smith does like his multi tight end sets, which doesn't necessarily mean they both get passes thrown their way. I see Jonnu Smith as the better receiver of the two, and knowing the system of Arthur Smith through his time in Tennessee and in Atlanta, he pretty much slots right in and becomes the main guy in my eyes. And Firerbooth, I think he'll still get some shots, but I don't think he's going to get enough volume to warrant being in this high on the list or being on the top 24. Aaron Rodgers coming in, I've never really known him to support more than one tight end. So that's another thing. I think it's Jonnu all the way, which kind of made it a little easier to knock Firemuth off, uh, unless he can get a lot of touchdowns. But yardage, I don't think is going to be there either. So he's just the odd man out for me.
Yeah. So In terms of blocking skills and capabilities and stuff, I think Fryermuth is probably going to be a little bit more in the inline blocker, and Jonnu might be going out a little bit more. I think Jonnu won't finish number four. I have
Right.
him, and with Arthur Smith, his past history has been what a roughly 50 catches. I think was his
Hmm.
peak, I should say, in a year that he was with Arthur Smith. So Jonnu, while we leaving him on the list, we're probably seeing him in the um, you know, definitely the second half. Well, the second half of this list at 24, and maybe in that middle of that second half, in that 18 to 20 range, is probably what I'm thinking right now for Jonnu. I think it's going to get way overdrafted if people are looking at last year.
Yeah, 80 catches for John, who kind of came out of nowhere, and that was a very bad Dolphins team that really they didn't have time to drop back and throw it deep, so it had to go short, and John who was there. So yeah, he's a guy I'm definitely been off of most drafts already.
All right. Well, so that takes care of those two, and all in our thoughts there.
Well, one more tandem here I want to talk about. Obviously, probably the biggest name on here that you dropped off, Travis Kelsey.
Yep. So I think this is the year. And we talked about a little bit when we were talking about some of the Chiefs wide receivers. We talked about a little bit with Mahomes. Now, Ricky's personal opinion is Mahomes going to get back into that 4,500 yard range. Problem is, I don't think many of those yards are going to go to Kelsey. I think they're going to protect him. They're going to preserve him. Coach Andy Reid has also said already that he plans to protect Kelsey from himself. And Noah Gray, as we can see here, finished in the top 24 last year at number 19, and he's not athletically gifted like a Kyle Pitts maybe, but he is a solid tight end. And so I just think that Noah Gray will stay in the top 24 and Kelsey will fall out. Now, I what I expect is that as you get later in the year near playoff time, and the seeding is really getting hot and heavy, you'll see Kelsey playing more, but still not enough to get him into the top 24. And at his age too, there's still a significant injury risk. Not to mention trying to keep up with Taylor Swift has this injury risk in and of itself. Um, but I digress. So anyway, I can't believe I went there, but I did. So anyway, I went with Noah Gray over Travis Kelsey on this one. You went the opposite direction. So why don't you talk about why you left Kelsey on there and you pulled Gray off?
Yeah, we've all heard the talk. They're going to reduce Kelsey. I don't know what that means. Does that mean instead of 120 targets, he gets 100, or is it 80? I think he'll still be very productive with his targets. Touchdowns, could might bail him out, which he was low on last year.
Yeah,
But my biggest reason for pulling Noah Gray off was once Marquise Brown came back last year, Hollywood Brown came back from injury, Gray disappeared. So it felt like he was the fill in for those targets. And now we're coming in with Brown healthy, Rasheed Rice healthy, Xavier Worthy coming back. That's a lot. We've been talking about Mahomes having a big year, a lot of yards. I just don't know if that's going to be enough for Gray to get involved also, especially with those three wide receivers. Kelsey's still going to get his. They're going to have to keep him happy, and that's going to be he's going to have some good games as probably slower games, maybe the blowouts or something like that. But I just don't think the volume is going to be there for Gray this year.
yeah. So I think Gray's going to get some of that Kelsey volume. So, but that's why both of us are doing this. You get multiple opinions for those who are out there watching and listening. So you can weigh those and figure out where you want to go with it as we move forward. But
Skip
uh,
them both and take George Kittle.
yeah, there you go. That's probably the safest advice on a few of these is go get a kiddo who is unfortunately falling much further than he should in drafts relative to McBride and Bowers. People forget that
Yeah.
Kittle finished number one in tight end, not those other two. Um, and so with that though, let's go ahead and talk about Zach Ertz, who we both left off the list. And so talk to us about why you left Zach Ertz off the list.
Uh, age. Age had a lot to do with Zach Ertz here. He's been around forever. And with this team already having a little bit of drama, I guess, with Terry McLaurin and then Debo coming over, I do think Terry McLaurin's situation gets settled. I think he is back start of the season. We have Debo coming in. think he's going to eat some of these touches. Austin Eckler's another guy who I think's actually going to steal some of this volume as well, especially on third downs and whatnot. And with his age and everything, I'm worried about injuries and just him falling off a cliff, basically production wise.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, and that's you hit on a couple of the key reasons why I took him off. One is the age. We're talking 35 now, if I remember correctly, 34, 35.
Yeah,
So I mean, which is roughly Kelsey's age as well. And if I'm pulling Kelsey off, then I got to pull Ertz off as well with that age factor. But Ertz has been a lot more injury prone through the years than Kelsey, that's for sure.
right.
And you hit really well on the Debo point. I think a lot of those short throws, instead of going to Ertz for him to catch and fall down after about an 8-yard gain, are going to go to Debo, and for Debo to kind of try and hopefully, if he's in good enough shape, burst through and make good progress in yardage. So, and then there's been talk about Ben Sinnott, the second rounder from last year. Expect him to get more playing time. They didn't draft him in the second round to sit him on the bench. So, expect similar to Kelsey, you could maybe even see Ertz being kind of playing time limitations to really preserve him, kind of in that, for when we get close towards playoff time and maybe even playoffs as well. So, for those reasons as well, and you brought up Eckler as well, who everybody feels like he fell off the cliff, and his stats weren't that bad for the games he played. So uh, with that, I do see that Ertz falls off the list here as well. But I didn't think Sinnott would do enough to get into the top 24, though I felt he would impact
Right.
Ertz as well, as a side note, because of Debo and and Eckler and some of the others.
That's the other thing of this. Just because we took somebody off the list doesn't mean we put the replacement back on. It's not every situation is great here, production wise for these guys. Uh, Probably one name we both considered getting off, and we kept putting back on Kyle Pitts.
Kyle Pitts, boy, you just want to pull him off.
Right?
And is he going to be fully healthy? Are they going to use him? Is he going to block? You were hoping with Zach Robinson coming in and bringing in a new offense that they would take advantage of Pitt's skills. It happened enough to get him to number 15 on the list. They renewed his fifth-year option and all, but for whatever reason, he's just not a thing. And we want to root for him. We want to hope that top 5 draft capital for those that I don't own him in Dynasty, luckily, but for those that own him in Dynasty that made a huge investment in him because of the uniqueness of the tight end position, you just want him to do well, and you're begging, but it's just not happening, Sean. Granted, he had 1,000 yards that first year, but then he had some injuries, and I just don't know if he's ever fully recovered from those injuries. And then the lack of blocking, even from a snap count percentage perspective, the blocking tight end for him last year was it Charlie Werner? I can't remember who it was, but the blocking tight end played more snaps last year in the second half of the year than Pitts did. So when you have that happening as well, and the way Penix targeted Drake London as well, like his best friend for life kind of thing, I just don't see it happening for Pitts. Your thoughts?
He had a career high of 4 touchdowns last year. What do you mean?
That's a great call out. Only 4 touchdowns at 6'5", 6'6", and only 4 touchdowns. You would think in the red zone, he could jump and dominate, but now those are Drake London's. Even if he was,
Yeah.
if they were using him, Drake London would take that over. But Sean, go ahead.
I mean, his touchdowns have went one in his rookie year, then 2, 3, and 4. So that tells me he's getting 5 touchdowns this year, just based off that. I mean, realistically, his targets were down, his receptions were down, his yardage was only down a little bit. He still had 600 yards. The year before, he had 660 yards. So it's not that he's just terrible for fantasy. It's we all remember his draft capital, and that's what it is. He just doesn't play to where he was drafted.
Right.
We expect him to be Trey McBride, George Kittle, Travis. We expect him to be there based on where he was drafted, and that's just not the case. like you said, a lot of it's the blocking. They still got to use him in some of these sets, but it was close, and I did pull him off my list at least once before I put him back on, just because some of these guys are in some probably worse situations. That's the only thing that really saved him.
Yeah. Now, as negative as I was talking about him, I too left him on my list at the end when I turned, when I turned mine in with you and so forth, when we started comparing notes. And so for all that negativism, as I'm saying, yeah, he's going to finish in the top 24, but no one's expecting him to jump into that top five. Right.
Correct.
So now, one name I did want to make sure that we touched on
Yeah.
is Taysom Hill. And we both pulled him off the list. He finished number 22. Of course, he left last year with an injury. But one of the things that you and I both noticed on my fantasy league was that he changed positions. So, Sean, you want to talk about his position designation, some of the changes there?
Yeah, he seems to have switched to quarterback. And so when we pulled at when we updated the list, going back and looking on the site and everything, we couldn't find him, and it kind of threw me off for a while. I was trying to figure out what happened to the list, why it changed, and it's him being moved. So with him not having that,
And to quarterback, surprisingly.
yeah. As much as I dislike the way Travis Hunter is being handled from site to site, we've seen Taysom Hill has done the same thing for years now. I think the Taysom Hill experiment's just about over. This big injury this past year, I think, is going to be enough that he just kind of disappears after this.
Yeah, well, he is about to turn 35 years old, and people lose sight of that fact that his first year in the NFL with the Saints, he was age 27, so he's
Mm-hmm.
turning 35. So that's a key point. And but back to my point about him being made a quarterback, I just pulled up his stats here real quick. Last year, before his injury, he played 8 games. He had 39 rushing attempts. He had 23 receptions on 31 targets. And from a passing perspective, he threw a total of 4 passes. So I'm not sure my fantasy league's logic of moving to quarterback, but regardless, this is once again why and maybe it's the fear that all the Shuck, Rattler, Hayner all suck, and then they'll put Taysom in there, and then to avoid noise later in the year, that could be the rationale. I could see that as an argument. But regardless, we certainly don't see him come back to the top 24 at the tight end position, particularly if he's at another one. But he'll probably miss the first part of the year anyway, so that'll probably knock him out. But it's once again a reminder: make sure you understand your rules, make sure you understand your scoring system, be sure and look at player positions as well. Particularly for those of you that play IDP, I just joined a RSO league this year, Reality Sports Online. It's a salary cap league, and a lot of the positions, particularly on defensive line and linebackers and edge and defense tackles, all those are really mixed up from what I would expect, particularly when you think about the true position stuff that we did as part of our series here. So once again, check positions, know your scoring rules, etc. So that's the moral of the Taysom Hill story, besides the fact that we don't see him repeating. All righty. So before we go and show you who we think is going to move into the top 24 now, just a quick plug for idpplus.com. IDPplus.com has great articles, great rankings, great tools, and as the plus says in IDP, they do more than IDP. They do plus. They do IDP and offense, and they also have betting recommendations as well. So go and check it out. And the tools that I talk about and the articles and all cover both offense and IDP. Great site, a lot of talented writers, uh, podcasters, live streamers, rankers, etc. You name it. So be sure and check out idpplus.com. Okay. And with that now, let's move on and show the folks that the 9 people that we had to add to the list to replace the 9 that we took off. And once again, you and I, 7 was the magic number in terms of we picked 7 of the same folks that joined the list. But then we had 2 where we differed in terms of who we had joining the list. So Sean, I'm going to start off with you. with Tyler Higbee, who was really effective when he finally came back from his knee injury last year. You left him, you added him back to the top 24. Why don't you tell everybody why?
Yeah, and just to point out, two names I added. I kept switching around with the two names you added, so I'm really glad you picked those, and I stuck with my two. Otherwise, I would have switched one or two to make sure we could talk about all four of these guys, because I do think they all warrant some conversation. But back to Tyler Higbee, I know they drafted Ferguson. Is that right? Terrence
Yep,
Ferguson.
Terrence Ferguson. That is correct.
I really don't see him taking over this position this year. I think this is the last year of Tyler Higbee in LA being productive, especially with the way Matt Stafford just kind of fell off last year. He just wasn't very productive. So I'm thinking maybe his arm's going. Maybe we start seeing some more short passes. And I think Higbee's that guy. I'm sure, Devontae Adams, Puka Nacua, they're going to get targets and whatnot. I expect them to have really good seasons as well. But Higbee's just kind of forgotten. And, he's been a favorite of Stafford's during their time together. And if not for that injury that kept him out most of the year, we'd be looking at him very different right now.
And his age doesn't concern you this year?
Not this year. I do think this is the last Tyler Higbee year. So I say he goes out very strong this year. Probably becomes a backup or leaves the team, and we probably never see him again.
Oh,
But
wow.
this year we
Oh,
see
that's
him.
really falling off.
Yeah, if I'm going to be dark, I may as well go all the way with it. But no, I do see him having a solid season this year. I do, because
Yeah,
even
he
with
would.
those two receivers, I think they help open up a lot of lanes for him. Uh, with the coverage that both of them are going to have to command. Both of them are like number one receivers, so they're going to have to figure out which receiver or try to double both of them. He's going to have plenty of open shots here.
Yeah, he was one I definitely debated on, particularly the way when he came back from injury and the way he was so successful, at the end of the season into the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
But always, I've seen too many times where some of these 3 game bursts late in the year don't translate as you would think. And, if you try and extrapolate that to, oh, wow, he would play the full year. And so that will happen this coming year. And I'm a little bit worried that that won't happen. And I think Terrence Ferguson, the more I thought about it, I feel like he will get a little bit more playing time, particularly as the year progresses.
Yeah,
So I did debate about Higbee, but then when you throw Devontae Adams, who tends to play 16, 17 games unlike Cooper Kupp, so he's going to demand a lot of targets and attention. I think Whittington actually takes a little bit more of a step up than to Atwell, to be honest with you. Ferguson gets a little bit. I think all of those things factor into. I couldn't quite put Higbee in the top 24, but I do understand your logic.
yeah, I don't hate that side of it either. Like I said, I went back and forth on it quite a bit. I don't like Ferguson enough to put him on this list, but I do think Higbee could, for 3 quarters of the season, I think he'll do enough. I'm also banking on him getting touchdowns enough to kind of overcome some of the yardage and reception issues.
Well, I think if we're doing this list next year, I think we would be putting Ferguson on this list of joining the top 24.
More than likely.
Yeah.
More than likely. I'm also a little concerned about Matthew Stafford himself being not so young and a little bit injury concerned. That if somebody does have to come in, tight ends are usually the backup and the rookies' friends, young guys' friends. So they're kind of the targets there too. So I'm kind of banking on some of that as well. I don't see Stafford playing a full season. Might be wrong, might be right. One of my favorite guys on here that I did leave off that nobody is looking at, nobody is taking, Theo Johnson. There's no other tight end there.
Yep. Well, I just grabbed Theo and the Scott Fishbowl, and I was more than happy to add him to my team. So before he got hurt, and so he only played through through week 13.
Mhm.
His last 4 games, though, they really started to increase his usage. Of course, he was a rookie last year. So in his last 4 games played, he had 23 targets, 15 catches, about 180 yards, and a touchdown. So I really like the usage that they were starting to have there. And once again, to the point I just said, it's hard to take like these last 4 games and extrapolate and say, oh my gosh, he had 15 catches over 4 games, multiply that by four, and then round up a little bit because that'd be only 16 games. All of a sudden, holy cow, that's pretty productive tight end. So you got to be careful about that. But I do think that the Giants were starting to use him more, got confidence. It's a shame he got injured, and I think he will absolutely do enough to break in the top 24. And let's see, in terms of who they added at the wide receiver position, that could maybe take away from him. Of course, Malik Neighbors is there. They added uh, no one. It's still Slayton, Wandale Robinson, um, um, Jalen Hyatt. So they really didn't add anyone. Oh, they added a dynamic running back in the draft. Well, I wouldn't call Scatterboot dynamic. So I think there's an opportunity for Theo Johnson with the same type of play calling to have a really solid season and break in the top 24. In fact, I could see him pushing top 12 this coming year. Um,
I like that.
so I feel that's how I'm feeling on Theo Johnson. So getting him as late as I did in the Scott Fishbowl draft just now, I was really thrilled to do that.
Yeah, I just missed out on him actually, but he was one of my late targets as well. Because, like I said, he's completely overlooked, and he's getting ready to play with the best quarterback he's had in his short career, Russell Wilson. Which it's not like Russell Wilson of old, but he's still better than anything he had last year.
Yeah. And Russell Wilson, when he was in Seattle, remember he used to target the Will Disleys of the world, for example.
Jacob
And
Hollister's.
yeah, he's Jacob Hollister, another great name from the past who never quite turned out as everybody hoped.
Well,
And a lot
there's
of
a
people
lot
had a
of them.
hard time letting him go of.
There's a lot of them. So the reason I know some of these names is I actually did a little, just to get sidetracked here for a second. I did a little digging because I'm a little worried about Brock Bowers in Vegas there because I couldn't think of a time where just Pete Carroll had just one good tight end. In the last 10, 15 years that just blew up. So I was worried about usage there, and I know I'm getting sidetracked here, but yeah, it goes all the way back to Jimmy Graham, an old Jimmy Graham that actually broke 900 yards, had double digit touchdowns. But outside of that, there was a lot of years of two tight ends and three tight ends getting 200 or 300 yards apiece, 4 or 5 touchdowns. So I was a little worried about usage, but seeing Jimmy Graham in there, even at his older age, like late 20s, early 30s, being able to produce some pretty good numbers, made me feel better about Brock Bowers' usage. But anyway, that was the side note.
Yeah, well, we are talking about tight ends, so just a quick tangent on Bowers. Bowers is one that I like as well, but I don't see him exceeding or even hitting his numbers from last year.
That's where I'm at. I don't like the
And so
price
people
tag
that
for him.
drafted him in round one or round two, whatever, I
Yeah.
think that's going to be too high, and they're gonna get some good scoring, but I just don't think it'll be as high as this past year. They really dominated the targets to
Yeah.
him this past year, and I think there was a reason they went out and added a Jack Besh and a Deontay Thornton, and they still have Jacoby Myers, and they're going to have Ashton Jinty out of the backfield as opposed to plotting Alexander Madison, for example.
Mm-hmm.
So I think Bowers is going to take a target hit. So since we're talking about tight ends, you brought that up. I just thought I'd add my 2 cents as well.
And that was my concern as well. And again, for the price tag that you had to pay for Brock Bowers, you wait 2 rounds and get George Kittle. That's
Yep,
that's where I'm going.
absolutely, absolutely. All right. So what we talked about Jonnu and Pat Fryermuth and the impact of the trade from the Dolphins to the Steelers,
Yeah,
and then the Dolphins, and we just talked about the Giants. By the way,
yeah,
we planned it this way as a side note.
yeah.
But Darren Waller traded from the Giants to the Dolphins to fill that Junno Smith hole. You put him on the list.
I
I
did.
didn't. I tried. I just couldn't get all the way there, Sean. So tell
So
everybody why you put Darren there.
yeah, and I've scoffed at this for a week or two now, and then I started playing with the narrative of Tyreek Hill is going to get mad or whatever. He's going to blow up, get traded away. We're now, Jalen Waddle's the top guy now. Westbrook Akine is there as well. HN, Jalen Wright. There's still some targets to be had across the middle. Let's just say Darren Waller plays 12 games. If he can stay that healthy, and Tua can stay that healthy, then we're looking at a guy who's been in the top before. Yes, he's older, but he also got healthier this past year. So could it be
You
similar
don't
to
think he
when?
pulled a hamstring doing his some
Not
of his
yet.
music and dance videos and stuff?
Not yet. I don't. It's probably coming. uh, but what if he pulls a Gronk, sits out a year, comes back, and blows up? I think it's the least considering. However, I would not put a lot of draft capital on Mr. Waller here. If you can pick him up off the waivers, even better. Wouldn't put a lot of money on him. However, if he is healthy and this offense is rolling, I do think there is a scenario where he can put up some pretty significant numbers, whether they be yardage or touchdowns. So it's worth considering. I don't feel great about it. I really don't. I really don't.
Yeah.
But
So this
I
goes back to your comment very early in the show
yeah,
where we talked about it is a little bit hard filling these last couple of spots of who we thought would go into the top 24. So I hear you. So and as a reminder to our audience, for those that might be new, for those that have been following along, thank you for following us throughout the series. For those that maybe it's their first time, this is not the order that we expect them to finish, just who we expect to jump into the top 24. So this isn't a
right.
rankings order, just to remind folks as well as a side note. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. And the guy I kept putting on this list, taking off this list, uh, we're only seeing 1 to 2 rookies over the last 3 years finish in the top 24. And since you and I already had a couple on there, who we'll discuss here in a little bit, uh, I decided to take Mason Taylor back off the list. Plus, I had some concerns with. Sure, Justin Fields will probably be good for fantasy purposes, rushing, probably some throwing. I expect Garrett Wilson to have a good year. Mason Taylor could, or if Justin Fields explodes, then I don't know what's going to happen. So, let's tell everybody how good you feel about Mason Taylor, I guess.
Well, to your point on Justin Fields, the reason I left Mason Taylor in there is I still think he is going to be the number 2 target for the Jets. And for a tight end to really be successful, really successful, you have to be one of the 2 target monsters on your teams, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And Alan Lazard and Josh Reynolds and Malachi Corley and Xavier Gibson and Jeremy Ruckert and Stone Smart, none of those guys, I feel like, can exceed what Taylor can do as the number 2 target. Justin Fields also is known for not throwing a lot to running backs. In fact, he is near the bottom of quarterbacks in terms of percent of throws to running backs. So as a side note, I think that's going to hurt Breece Hall. But that means is he's either running or he's still looking up the field. And if he's still looking up the field, granted, I don't think he's going to I think they're going to be run heavy and they're not going to throw as much. But I think he's going to do enough for Garrett Wilson and for Mason Taylor, particularly enough for Taylor to break into the top 24. I think he's actually a little bit better than 23, 24. I think he finishes in that 14, 15 range, not top
Oh,
12,
wow.
because part of the reason is I don't think they score a lot of touchdowns with the Jets. So, but that's my logic for Taylor. You brought up a great point about the number of rookie tight ends that do not typically break the top 24. It is usually 1 or 2. So that is a fantastic point statistically, and a lot of this is built around statistics. The whole premise of the show is around that. So it's a great call out. I think this is the year, though, that there's a chance for 3 because there's other years when there's been 1. And so it gets to that average of 1 or 2 kind of thing. So that's my
Sure.
logic on Mason Taylor.
I mean, to your point, when Justin Fields was in Chicago, he supported both DJ Moore and Cole Kmet, gave them, probably their both of them their best seasons as a pro in the league. I just don't know if Cole was a rookie or not, or a second year guy. So that part of that I think is it's harder for tight ends just to come in and dominate. That's why it's been so impressive with Laporta a couple years ago, Brock Bowers last year. And I just don't see Mason Taylor quite on their level. Although I do think he's definitely a receiving tight end. But I hope he does. I really do.
So now we both put Dalton Kincaid onto the list for the top 24. Of course, he had a down year last year compared to his first year, his rookie year. Tell everybody your thoughts on Dalton Kincaid.
I think it was more to do with I didn't have any better options. I really, I really don't
I'm a little
feel.
bit more confident in that, but continue.
Yeah, I don't feel super great about Kincaid. I think he'll do just enough to get in the top 24, but I don't see him being top 12 or anything like that. Just with the type of runs they want to do, like there's a three-headed backfield. Throw Justin or not just Josh Allen in there as well. The receivers are all okay. None of them are great. And then you still have Dawson Knox, who still commands some attention as well. So this is a very team oriented team and not really individuals. So I think he does get a little lost here, but I think he will do enough to kind of regain that form from 2 years ago. And it's really going to come down to touchdowns for me. Can he get more than two? If he does, then fantastic. Then I think he definitely warrants a spot on here.
Yeah. So I think Kincaid is going to, the injuries last year really hurt him,
Mm.
including when it came out after the playoff loss when he didn't catch that last pass. He'd been playing with, I believe it was a PCL injury for about the middle of the year. And there was one other injury he had as well that was a little bit more known. So I think he was just playing banged up and trying to give it his all. And that also impacted his snap count as well because it was down from the first year to the second year as well. So I really think with his healthiness, and to your point, they do spread it around, but I think they don't have a number one wide receiver. I think Kincaid actually could be more so than Keon Coleman, has the chance to absolutely lead this team in receptions over Shakir, etc. And I think with him being healthier, he'll be on the field more. I think he'll actually impact Shakir's targets, by the way, and results as well. And I think Kincaid actually ends up back top 12. So I'm a little bit differing from you in terms of him barely being in there. I think he's going to jump back in to the
Yeah,
top 12. That is.
it comes down to the touchdowns for me. If he gets 3, 4 more touchdowns, then that shoots him even higher. But right now his floor is a ceiling at 2.
Yeah, and so James Cook won't have 18 touchdowns again this year. Now, so
That's
I know
true.
that's a combination of rushing and receiving,
Yeah,
but some of those touchdowns are going to go to other places. Some will go to Josh Allen. Some might go to Ray Davis, and I think some of those will go to Kincaid as well.
big Josh Palmer. You forgot about him.
Yeah, he's not the touchdown guy though. He's
He's
not big
not.
in the
He's really
red
not.
zone exactly. So that's the argument for Kincaid. But then we talked about Mason Taylor from a rookie perspective, but then we also had two other rookies on the list. We had Colston Loveland and Tyler Warren. Which one you want to talk about? You want to talk about Warren?
I feel better about Warren. I do like his situation better. He's definitely coming in healthier than Loveland. The so I do feel more confident there. I totally expect Daniel Jones to grab this starting spot. Anthony Richardson, for what I've seen, he's just not it. And I do think Daniel Jones was brought in to win this spot, and he's pretty big at targeting his tight ends. So I know it's not the greatest offense out there. The offensive line took some hits. They really didn't add anybody else. So why not? Why can't a rookie just come in there and be the top 2, maybe number 1 target for this team? But I do see him at least being the probably second target option in this, even over Pierce. I think Josh Downs is actually the number 1 guy there in Indy right now. So yeah, like his situation a lot better. They're going to be behind, or I expect them to be behind and have to catch up. So a lot of garbage time. If all the corners and safeties are dropping back, there's a lot of open spots in the middle. It's easy to get 20-yard gains that way late in the game. So I definitely like his position better.
So do you think he's going to be used as a wild card, like a little bit of a Taysom Hill, like they used him at Penn State? Do you see that happening or not realistically? I know a lot of people trying to put that up. I don't actually see that as with
Now,
we have a Jonathan Taylor. If Richardson is healthy and you're going to do a tush push, take out Jones and put Richardson in there for the tush push or whatever. I just don't see that for Warren like people are talking about. What do you think?
No, no, I see him as kind of like the way I see Mason Taylor being just more of a receiving guy. Yeah, I don't see him being a blocking guy. I don't see him being a big gadget guy. I really don't. Part of that, I think, is just how kind of vanilla the Colts offense is. Like I don't see him being that creative, and maybe they throw some little trick plays in there like that, or something weird or wild. But gadgets only get you so far. I mean, we've seen the Wildcat come out and get kind of smashed, but the tush push is the only thing that's really hung uh, multiple years here. But I don't see him getting used that way. Not with the rest of the talent they got there.
Yeah, I don't either. And so I don't think he gets that extra bump in the stats. And it's
Mm-hmm.
part of the reason I know you like Warren a little bit more than Loveland. I talked on the quarterback show my theory about what's going to happen with the coach quarterback situation. That
Yeah.
I think actually Richardson, because they start off with him actually, despite all the Jones discussion, Richardson, that they feel the pressure. He starts sucking. They quickly go to Jones, and then as the year progresses, when they're out of the playoffs, they are supposed to be out of the playoffs, whatever. Then they put Richardson back in to give him one last shot to prove himself before they go into the draft next year. So I think that's how it's going to play out, and as a result, that's why I don't feel great about Warren. Whereas I feel really good about Caleb Williams from a quarterback perspective with the Bears and with Ben Johnson and so forth. All this talk about, yeah, I was great, feeling great about Loveland until they drafted Burden. Well, Burden's still behind DJ Moore. He's still
Mm-hmm.
behind Roma Dunze. I wouldn't be surprised if Olamide Zacchaeus, who they signed in free agency, isn't ahead of Burden to start the year, at least at a minimum. So
I,
I'm not really worried about Burden or Olamide. The one thing I am worried about is there was a report, I believe I read yesterday, that Loveland threw with his left arm, and here's training camp about to start. Now, subsequently, 24 hours later, or maybe 48, I'm losing track of time, it was talked about today that he said he's going to be 100% ready for camp. So do I believe he's 100% ready? Not quite, but do I think he'll be ready enough as we get into training camp that he can do enough and be starting on week one? I think the answer is yes. And because I feel a lot better about Caleb Williams, Ben Johnson, the Bears' offensive situation for the Colts, I actually feel much better about Loveland than I do about Tyler Warren. And when you're throwing for, I think Caleb Williams is going to break 4,000 yards this year, just barely. First time for Bears. So you can feed a lot of mouths with 4,000 yards. When you're throwing for about, I don't know, 2,800, 2,900 yards combined, that I think the Colts will throw far, and you got Pierce and Downs and Pierce slash Mitchell, and a few dump offs to the running back and Warren. I just don't know if the volume is going to be there enough for Warren. I don't think they're going to target him that much over these other guys to warrant Warren jumping up way into the top 12. I think Loveland has a better shot of that.
yeah, it's the injury concern. Like I said, he's not going to be. He is going to be ready. So there's already some concern there injury wise. Granted, it's not looked at as a serious injury right now anyway, but there's also the Cole Kmet factor where he could eat up some of that as well, target wise and all that. Whereas Warren pretty much owns that tight end room just by being there. I think with his draft capital, but I really expect both these guys to have really solid seasons. I don't know if they either one really jump in that top 12. I think both of them be knocking on that door. Um, yeah, both plenty to love and like for both these guys, but again, it's hard for rookies to do it their first year.
Now, there's one more I want to talk about, and we didn't actually have it on our scripts. I'm going off script, Sean, and that's Evan
Okay.
Ingram. And
Speaking of injuries,
speaking of injuries in the 30s,
yeah,
people are talking about, oh, he's going to be Sean Payton's Joker. I don't think he's a Joker like
no,
an Alvin Kamara would be, and so forth. And I think there's going to be a wide distribution. I think Sutton will do well. I don't think he'll do quite as well as last year, but I think Mims will get some, and I think Vele will get some, and I think Franklin will get some, and I think Pat Bryant will get some. And
mhm.
they have R.J. Harvey out of the backfield now and J.K. Dobbins out of the backfield now versus what they had last year. And so I'm not expecting this massive return to his Jacksonville peak days,
No.
peak year. So while I'll put him on the list, he's one I didn't feel great about. But to your point, it was hard to put some folks on the list.
Yeah.
And while you and I differed on a couple, I actually had Ingram lower in terms of adding to the list below Theo Johnson and Mason Taylor. But
Oh
once
wow.
again,
Okay.
yeah, so I have him much lower. That I don't feel great about Ingram at all. So your thoughts?
Yeah, it's injury history, and then again to your point, the offensive distribution there. When he was in Jacksonville, he was the number two target, sometimes the number one guy, uh, but his competition was Christian Kirk. Good PPR guy, but not the big play guy. Last year, injured multiple times. Been injured a lot throughout his career. I do think he could be a 500-yard receiver, 4 touchdowns, which is enough to get on this list, but it's not enough to really shoot you towards the top. So, but that's all it takes to get on this list, for a tight end. So,
That's rather said. 500 yards, 5 touchdowns, 50 catches. You're on the list. Just
yeah,
fair.
if I
And
tell you
you're
that
you're
for
you're
a
bunched with
receiver,
about 12 other tight ends around that same number.
yeah, right. So, I think he's a fun addition to the Broncos because they haven't had a tight end in a while that was just dominant or anything for more than half a season. I think it's been a while since they've really had anybody there. I think uh, if he can capture at least his Giants days, early Giants days, uh, which again were injuries. But no, I don't see the Jacksonville prime either coming back. No 900 yards, 100 catches, and all that. But he's never been a huge touchdown guy. But he's usually good for a handful, 4 or 5 touchdowns like that. So
So like in best ball right now, we see, you got the top three, the McBride, the Bowers, and the Kittle going
mhm.
in top, not necessarily in that order. Then you have the quote mid-tier tight ends where Ingram is going, and then you have all these others. I am in best ball. I haven't picked him one time. I have bypassed him every time for
Yeah,
tight ends later in the process. If I didn't
uh,
get one of the big three, I'm just waiting until later. I'm bypassing him because
and
of the
right drafts in general so far. I'm missing the top three because I don't want to pay for the top two. They're too high for me, and I just miss out on Kittle a lot of times. So if I don't get Kittle, I'm basically waiting several rounds before I take Jake Ferguson. That's a guy that I think will outscore his ADP just from then a lot of that is banking on Dak Prescott being healthy and really feeding him the ball like Dak does. He's known for targeting his tight ends. So uh, if I can't get one of those guys, I'm waiting. Brenton Strange is another guy I keep picking up because I do kind of like his situation there in Jacksonville. Nothing's for certain there, and we've seen what Cohen has done for Kate Otten over the years. So that's another guy I'm looking at, and yeah, if the draft is deep enough, there's enough rounds. Theo Johnson is a guy I'm looking at as well. But yeah, Ingram, he's going higher than I'm willing to give up for him.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. All right, good deal. Well, with that, Sean, and before we get into talking about our next series that we're going to do for everybody, hopefully help them win some fantasy football champions, that concludes our tight ends and our 9 shows for the year. So I'm going to come back and ask you a question of 9 shows in this series, excuse me,
Mm,
related to top 24 repeaters and non-repeaters. But before I come back and ask you a question about that, I do need to put a quick plug for the Fantasy Football Consistency Guide by Bob Lung. You know, these players that give you peaks one week and then valleys the next week and end up killing you. Bob does all the research to let you know who has the highest repeat rates in terms of getting the top 12, 24, et cetera, week over week. And to propel you to success, go to Amazon, check out Bob Lung's Fantasy Football Consistency Guide. Bob is also the host of the Fantasy Football Expo in Canton, Ohio. He lives there. And so, once again, just another plug for that coming out. Bob's another person you can meet. Great guy. Check out his consistency guide as well. And as a side note, that consistency guide for those that are playing in guillotine leagues, as that's getting more and more popularity, I would check the consistency guide for thought process on how I'm drafting my guillotine league. So I'll just plant that seed for people to think about. All right, Sean, we've completed our series. And as a reminder, I didn't say it at the beginning of the show, but part of our thought process is look at the numbers and stats of what they tell you, but also what the great football diehard Bob Harris says. We're trying to draft this year's best team, not last year's best team. So that's what we're trying to apply. So, Sean, give your final kind of thoughts on the series of these nine top 24 repeaters and non-repeaters we've done.
This has been a lot of fun. It's been a lot of deep diving. I've probably spent more time and given more effort to this exercise over the last 9 weeks than I did all of high school. So
That's awesome.
I don't know if that's good or not, but no, this was a fantastic exercise challenge, and is very informative just from looking at the repeat rates from year to year, and to take the time to really look at these players as more than just hey, they were good last year, I should draft them again this year. There's a lot more involved and a lot more variables to look at, and so we're kind of learning here too, or I am at least, and based on when we come back and look at this series later in the year to see where we hit, where we didn't. We're hoping we can improve that process and nail it next year, to learn from what we did right and from what we did wrong. So actually really excited about this to keep
Yeah.
this going.
Right. And so for our listening audience, you did a lot of work in high school that shows how much work that you did on this for our
Yes,
listening and watching
lots of
audience. You
work in
did
high school.
lots. Well, look, so of course we started this, in the OTA minicamp time frame, and we're wrapping it up right as training camp is about to start. Notice that great timing that we did, folks, for you all.
Nailed it.
So now what's coming next? And we want you to continue to tune in IDP Plus advice. So here's how we're going to help you. We're going to go back to focusing on just IDP now for our next series of shows. And what we're going to do, and we're starting in 2 weeks, we're going to take a week off, and then we're going to come back in 2 weeks, and we're going to start off giving you the news and notes and injuries and training camp reports and giving you our takes on them, some of those key news items and so forth to help you. And then we're going to do 2 divisions each week. And so over 4 weeks, and that'll lead you into late August and get you prepared for all your redrafts going into that. And of course, for those of you in Dynasty, you can use it at any point in time. So that's kind of our thought process. And in there, so Sean and I did some brainstorming in terms of, and we're going to do some categories to help you out. And Sean came up with some great names. So we're going to have the crown jewels from some of these divisions, which are MVP or league winners. We're going to give you the sending stars in terms of who we think is going to break out. You're going to hear the lemons or flops, which are the bust. You're going to hear return to relevance in terms of someone who might have been injured and we think is going to have a comeback or just had a bad year for whatever reason, maybe defensive schemes like a Foye Luakan, it maybe return to relevance. We're going to have sleepers, which we're calling hit gems. And we're going to talk about someone else who probably maybe isn't on the redraft radar for this year out of these divisions, but who's someone, particularly for Dynasty, call them future investment, hidden gems that you want to stash for the future kind of thing. So that's what Sean and I are going to do for you as we go through the, once again, 2 divisions each week, so 8 teams each week, and looking forward to that. Sean, I'm really excited. So, and I have a feeling that some of the research we did for our top 24 repeaters and non-repeaters are going to come back into play with maybe some adjustment as new news comes out of training camp and so forth. But I think a lot of that will come into play as we go into this next series of shows we're going to do.
I would think so. It's still fresh on the mind. So with the drafts I've been doing the last week, even best balls, I'm sitting there thinking about some of the stuff we've looked up, and I'm like, I think I'm going to let somebody else deal with that problem, and I move on to my next favorite draft pick. So, yeah, a lot of this is hanging in my head. I hope it's really sticking with everyone else, and I hope it pays off for all of us.
Yep. Hopefully this was a great learning exercise for everyone and a lot of fun and got you thinking. So that was our goal. So with that, if you like this show, please give it a thumbs up on YouTube and subscribe to the channel, please. If you have comments, suggestions, etc., please add those on the YouTube channel, and Sean and I will respond to those. Give me a follow at RickyRod66. Give Sean a follow at Sean8386 on X. And of course, you can catch a replay of this and the whole series on the IDP Plus channel under the IDP Plus advice storyline or whatever you call it underneath the channel, the buckets or groupings or whatever. You see IDP Plus if
Playlist.
you
The
scroll down.
playlist.
Yeah, playlist. Thank you. Oh my goodness gracious. Thank you. All righty, you bailed me out there. All right, so with that, we'll see. And you could, by the way, also catch on Spotify as well. So with that, we'll see you in about 2 weeks. And on behalf of Sean Teague, this is Ricky Rodrigue wishing you, your family, and your friends great health and happiness. Be kind to one another. We're out of here. We'll catch you next time in a couple of weeks, everybody.
Thank you for watching the IDP Plus YouTube network. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Be sure to tap the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload new content.